Resuming debate, the honourable member for Scarborough Rouge River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And at the outset, I'd want to let you know that I will be sharing my time with the honourable member from Pierrefonds-Dollard. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak in favour of this motion. It's encouraging to see the Liberals finally taking some action, actually, Mr. Speaker. I was disappointed when my friends refused to support the NDP motion to limit Senate partisan activity that we had put forward in front of the House before. The NDP motion would have limited Senate partisan activity that worked towards funding Canadians, which would hold the Senate accountable today and not next week or next month or after a hearing or at some point in the future, but it would have held the Senate accountable today, right now. But of course, our friends in this House didn't deem that topic important to support it. So moving on to the motion that is before us today, put forward by our Liberal colleagues. It's interesting that they have put forward this motion in front of the House now, Mr. Speaker, because we know that last week alone, the leader of the official opposition, the leader of the New Democratic Party, and our Prime Minister had 43 interactions, 43 exchanges of questions on this PMO scandal, while the leader of the Liberal Party used only 3 of his party's 45 possible questions last week. And we all know, Mr. Speaker, that it is the NDP that will continue to use all means possible, all means that are available to us, to ensure that we are keeping this government accountable and make sure that we're doing the work that needs to be done on behalf of Canadians to ensure transparency and accountability in this House, Mr. Speaker. Whatever our Minister of Foreign Affairs says, I couldn't hear it because his microphone wasn't on, Mr. Speaker, but I will assure him once again that it will be the NDP that holds this government to account. I appreciate the Minister of Foreign Affairs for not supporting the Liberals who are heckling me, apparently. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that clarification that was provided to me. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and this Conservative government need to stop changing their story. That's what we're asking for, and that's what Canadians are asking for, is to come clean. Come clean to Canadians by answering all the questions of the Prime Minister's office and the Prime Minister himself and his involvement with the Senate scandal, with Senator Duffy, Senator Wallin, any of the senators, actually. I can start listing names. They really need to start by releasing all the related documents that are available. I mean, so far what we've had is documents and information being leaked by Senator Duffy, but to be honest, Mr. Speaker, it should be coming from, I prefer the truth, or I prefer information coming straight from the horse's mouth, so that would mean directly from the source. The Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office have been very busy trying to cover up their own alleged corruption, while the Liberals appeared totally disinterested until all of a sudden now. So meanwhile, both Conservatives and Liberals continue to vote against sensible New Democrat proposals to restrict Senate partisan activity and partisan travel, partisan fundraising, partisan activity overall. That's what we tried to propose, Mr. Speaker, and both our friends across the aisle in the Conservative team and the Liberal team both opposed that proposition that we had. And seriously, Canadians are tired of an unelected, unaccountable, and under investigation Conservative and Liberal Senate. That's why, Mr. Speaker, New Democrats advocate the only real solution to this entire problem, this $90 million boondoggle, $100 million boondoggle, whatever we're going to call it, is to abolish the Senate, Mr. Speaker. That is the NDP's position. It has been the NDP's position for a very long time, and it will continue to be the NDP's position. The NDP will continue to use all of the means available to us to continue to keep this accountable, this government accountable, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister, one thing I want to add, Mr. Speaker, is that when the leader of the official opposition asks questions in this House, we don't really get answers. And when I speak to people in my community of Scarborough Rouge River, they're actually starting to get irritated and annoyed about what's happening in the Senate. And they ask me questions, and I don't really have answers for them because, Mr. Speaker, to be honest, we don't get answers from the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's office, his parliamentary secretary, anybody on the Conservative side, his cabinet ministers. Nobody provides us real answers. And The same questions that the Leader of the Official Opposition, Leader of the NDP, put forth in the House of Commons to the Prime Minister are the same questions that I'm being asked in my community in Scarborough. People want to know answers to simple questions. Was Nigel Wright dismissed, or did he resign? That's a pretty simple employment relations question to have answered, and there must be paperwork to document to back up either one of those claims if he was dismissed or if he resigned. Pretty simple question. We can't get a straight answer out of them. How many checks are there in total, Mr. Speaker? People are asking me these questions, and I don't have any answers to that, Mr. Speaker. How many people in the Prime Minister's office know about the Duffy cover-up? And who are they? I know we've heard few, we've heard several, we've heard 9, 13, 14, we don't know. And once again, we're looking for truth, we're looking for transparency, we're looking for accountability, and Canadians really do deserve better, Mr. Speaker. Another question, why did the Prime Minister claim that only Nigel Wright knew about the cover-up? And now, of course he's changed the story, and now that a few people in the Prime Minister's office knew about it. How many are a few? Usually, traditional language usage, few is more than 2, more than a couple, so it's 3, but we don't know, because he also said several. So what does that mean? Another question, Mr. Speaker. Was the Conservative Party ever going to pay for Mike Duffy's fraudulently claimed expenses? Do the Conservatives consider Duffy and Wallen's expenses inappropriate? We've heard both sides of the story, whether they do think it's appropriate or they don't think it's appropriate. And you know, Mr. Speaker, that in the Hansard from this House, that both of those comments are available to Canadians to find. And it's really not fair. That's the bottom of the story of what I'm getting at, truly, Mr. Speaker, is that Canadians deserve the real story. And we, as elected members of Parliament, are 308 representatives of the millions of Canadians across the country, and we deserve to get the truth so that we can take that back to our constituents. And we're getting multiple versions of stories, Mr. Speaker, and all that I'm asking for on behalf of my constituents is for one story, which is the truth, and that is the only story that we hear, not multiple versions. And that's all I want, Mr. Speaker. One truth, one story. Another question that constituents in my community are asking me is if I know when and how often the Prime Minister actually spoke with Nigel Wright. I don't have an answer for that either, Mr. Speaker. I really don't have answers to give to my constituents, and they're actually asking me this when I'm at the grocery store, when I'm at a community event, when I'm celebrating Diwali with my constituents. They're talking to me about a Senate scandal. And they're asking me questions about what is happening, how this government is wasting Canadians' money, and not using that for important things like ensuring that our young people are getting jobs, or ensuring that our young people are getting access to education, or average Canadians are not getting access to jobs because this government is not creating jobs here in Canada. This is a government that's supporting the jobs being shipped out of this country. And yet they're covering up a scandal of more than $90,000 or $100,000 of a check and spending so much extra money in making up different versions of stories. All Canadians want is for the truth to come out, for their own lives and the lives of all Canadians to improve, and for the betterment of our communities and our country as a whole. And we're not getting that, Mr. Speaker. Oh my goodness, 1 minute already? Wow, I had so much more to go through, Mr. Speaker, and wow, there's many questions that my constituents are asking me. Let me try and get some more out to you. They want to know how many lawyers are involved in the Prime Minister's office's cover-up of the Duffy affair. Who were the lawyers? Was Mr. Wright himself, oh my goodness, I have so many quotes from the Prime Minister himself. Let me try and make some sense here now. You threw me off, Mr. Speaker, with just the 1 minute here. So I think it would be interesting to say that on Wednesday last week, a cabinet minister defended the Prime Minister's former chief of staff, Nigel Wright, who played a central role in the Senate scandal and the PMO's orchestrated cover-up. And he said, and I quote, "I know Nigel Wright to be a person of good faith, of competence, with high ethical standards. And yet, we saw the Prime Minister come and say, well, Nigel Wright acted on his own accord and I had nothing to do with anything. You know who that minister was, Mr. Speaker? That minister was the Minister for Employment, Social Development and Multiculturalism. And I see you giving me the wrap-up sign, so Mr. Speaker, I really do believe that in opposition, we need to have true proposition to actually improve this place and the houses of this Parliament, and that is what the NDP is doing. That is what we will continue to do, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, there's many things that I could say. Suffice to say, the distortion of reality from the members' comments in terms of the Liberal Party's objection to what's taking place, nothing could be further from the truth. This is an issue that we have been on and have been pursuing it quite aggressively since day one. That is the reality. The member knows that. Having said that, today what we're talking about is that the Liberal Party wants, and I would suggest to you that Canadians from coast to coast to coast want this Prime Minister to be sitting in his place making a declaration under oath as to the full truth of what he knows, Mr. Speaker. That's the essence of the motion that we're talking about today. And I find it passing strange that we have yet to have only but one Conservative speak on this motion, Mr. Speaker. And I'm wondering if the member might want to provide comments as to why she believes that only one member so far has chosen to try to defend the Prime Minister.
The honourable member for Scarborough Rouge River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague from Winnipeg for his multitude of questions in there. And I'd like to talk about, firstly, of course, Mr. Speaker, the fact that he mentioned that the Liberal Party has been involved in this Senate scandal discussion and debate since day one. Were they? Where were they? Maybe they were involved since day one, Mr. Speaker, because guess what? They're in the Senate. They're part of this whole debacle. They're part of everything. They have their own senator who's under investigation, Mr. Speaker. They were part of this since day one, exactly. They're part of the scandal itself, Mr. Speaker. My question to my honourable Liberal colleague is, why is it that since the official opposition brought this forward in this House, why is it that the leader of the Liberal Party only used 3 of his possible 45 questioning opportunities to talk about this issue in the House of Commons, Mr. Speaker? Why? Why?
Questions and commentaires.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Compton-Stanstead. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I noted one particular aspect of my colleague's speech, which is that our constituents are asking themselves serious questions, and I think it's the word ethics that comes up the most often. Who's going to pay for this? Once again, there'll be no accountability on the part of the Prime Minister and his cabinet, and we find this completely unacceptable, that once again we're going to let a scandal that is a terrible scandal go by. It's one that puts the very credibility of all elected members at every level in question, and nothing's been done by the Prime Minister's office, which is the very nerve center of this entire situation. So I'd like my colleague to expand a bit on that. Plus, just to repeat, our constituents want to hear what's going on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for his question and his passion, because just like Canadians, he is very passionate, and he's right when he says Canadians are smart. I believe that Canadians are smart and that they will not put up with this government pulling the wool over their eyes for much longer, Mr. Speaker. They are smart and they know what transparency means. They know what accountability means. A government, especially the cabinet, which is the government, is there to be accountable to Canadians. Who's going to pay, he asked? It is, once again, Canadians who are going to pay, and it's everybody in this country who is paying taxes. Those are the people who are paying for this scandal and this cover-up and everything that's happening, Mr. Speaker, and those Canadians are the ones who are forking the bill for this government pulling the wool over their eyes, and Canadians are smarter than that, Mr. Speaker. They know.